Hello, my name is Dia and I will be your instructor for today. This video will be covering some advanced Android features, including list views and timers. List view is a really important topic and is crucial to understand properly as it's something that appears across almost every project. Before we get started, allow me to define some words for you. List view is something that lists out a bunch of items. Pretty self explanatory, right? On a phone, this counts as anything you scroll through, and therefore, it's something that you'll encounter in almost every single app on your phone. Think about Facebook, for example. The homepage of Facebook lists out a bunch of posts. Similarly, Twitter lists out a bunch of tweets, and the Messenger app lists out a bunch of recent messages. The list view feature makes up a core part of many popular apps, and it'll most likely appear somewhere in yours too. An array adapter, which we'll go over more in depth later when we're actually coding, is something that takes information from an array list, say numbers, and fills it inside of a list view. Think of it as a bridge between a Java array list and the list view feature that shows up on your screen. Now, before coding along with me, please make sure that you have previously created a virtual device to test your code on. So, creating a list view can generally be summed up in two main steps. First, you need to virtually add a list view into your XML file, and then programmatically add your items in your list view in your Java file. After that, you can play around and add as many functionality features as you want. So, let's switch over to Android Studio and start coding. Please give me a minute to pull up my project. Alright, so when you open up a new project, you'll come across this screen. From here, we'll go with the empty activity box right here and click next. I'll be naming my application list view demo, but you can name it whatever you would like. And I'm not going to be changing any of these things. I'll be keeping the language Java, and I will be going with the API 23 Android 6.0 Marshmallow. And just click finish. So as we wait for our file to open up, there it is. We are going to first head over to our XML file, which is right over here. And if you can remember, in this XML file, we'll be first virtually adding our list view. So let's wait for that to sync up. Okay, that's taking a while. Sorry about that. Our Java file opened up. Let's see. Oh, there we go. That took a while. Alright, here we are. So once you open up your empty activity file, this is kind of like the XML file that you'll come across. There's going to be nothing here, and your component tree is going to be mainly empty. So to add our virtually add our list view, we are first going to head up to the palette over here at the top, and we're going to go to legacy right at the bottom here and click on it. And in the legacy category over here at the top, you'll see list view. And to add this into our XML file is pretty easy. All you do is we drag and drop it over here into our component tree. And once that happens and you can see your list view here, click on the list view in your component tree and come up to the side over here. Here you can see these are our constraints. If we hit all these pluses, as we will do for this tutorial, we'll basically making sure that our list view takes up the entirety of our screen, or reducing our margins to 0. This is something that's really up to you, and you can play around with it as much as you want to see what you like best for your app. Essentially, it's like I said, it's just a way to add margins to our list view. And for now, we are basically adding 0 margins. And then next, we'll go up here to the top And we're going to give our list view an ID so we can access it later in our Java file. Let's just call it my list view like this, formatting it just as I'm chilling. So that's basically our first step, which in case you forgot was virtually adding our list view into our XML file. Pretty easy, huh? So now we'll move on to our next step, which is programmatically adding our list items in our Java file. And to do that, we're going to head over to our Java file over here, which is main activity.java. And let's make some space for ourselves here. We're just going to be typing under these large curly brackets right here. So to do this, we are first going to start out by getting access to our list view by referencing it. So to do this, we're simply going to write down list view. We're going to call a list view object, and let's call it my list view, like we called in our XML file. And this equals find view by ID. And here we're going to say r.id.myListView. And here we're referencing the list view from our XML file. So now that we have created or referenced our list view, we're going to create an array that's going to hold our list items. So for this demo, I'm going to be creating a string array list. So that's just array list of the type string. Oops. Just like that. And I am going to be creating a list of subjects. So I'll simply name my list my subjects. And to clarify, I'm talking about school subjects like courses. So I created my array list called my subjects. So we're just going to close that off like that. Once again, it's of type string. And we're going to add our semicolon. So you can make your list about anything you want. This is just me showing you how to make your list. So it can be anything you want. It can be a list of family members, a list of friends, a list of messages, or you can just do what I'm doing and make a list of subjects. So now that we have our array list and we have our list view, we're going to add items into our list. So to do this, we are going to use array.add. And to do this, we'll just first reference our array, which is my subjects. And then we'll use .add, and then we'll add a string that is basically related to that is basically the item that we want to add. So we can add in a couple subjects. Let's add in math. Out of that, add your semicolon. We can also add, let's say English. So my subjects dot add. We can say English. Oops. And then we can add more. We can add something like, we can add history. And last, we can add subjects.add science. And you can add more. This is just how much I'm going to add for our purposes for now. So at this point, we have initialized our list view right here. We have created our array list, and we have added items into that array list. But we have yet to add data from our array list into the list view. So to do this, we'll be using something called an array adapter that we mentioned before. So like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, an array adapter is going to be used to convert our items from the array list into the list view. It'll basically take information from the array and fill it inside the list view. So to do this, we'll call our array adapter here, array adapter, and it's going to be of type string. And to be original, we'll just call it array adapter. So let's finish writing that out. Array adapter of type string. Yeah, and as you can see, I guess not now, but yeah, there we go. As you can see, to initialize this, we're gonna need to define a bunch of things. More specifically, we'll need to define the context, the layout, which is basically like, is it an image, is it a text, like that. And then we're gonna have to initialize some kind of information in the form of a list, which is going to be our array. So we'll be using the following parameters. So for context, we'll be using this. For our layout, we'll be using android.r, capital R, dot layout dot simple underscore list underscore item underscore one. As you can see, the first one up here, you just click enter to have that write it out for you. And then lastly, for our array, we'll be using the array we mentioned before, which is my subjects. And there we go. So now we have filled in our array and we have created an array adapter. The issue is that our array adapter still doesn't know about our list view. It's only aware of the array and how it's supposed to display it. So to make our array adapter aware of the list view, we'll use something called listview.setAdapter. What it is we're going to name our list view is the name of our list view, which is, as I mentioned before, for us it's just my list view. And then we'll do dot set adapter. We're going to use this function. And inside we'll fill in our array, which is just array adapter. So here what we're saying is that the array adapter named array adapter will now be set to the list view called my list view. And with this, our list view and our array adapter are now connected. So at this point, we have finally completed step 2 and can run the app to display our list. This is about it. It's pretty simple. And on your side, you can run your code now in your app or however you made your list. And once you do, you'll see that you've successfully created your list view. So yeah, and I would love for you to experiment more with this. I actually recommend it. Please try creating different types of list views and trying out just like different things to see how they display. You can mess with your margins over here to see how that looks. And yeah. So let's switch back over to our slides. Give me a minute. There we go. So, like I said, I hope you experiment some more with list views. But for now, for our purposes, let's move on to timers. So the functions of timers is also pretty self-explanatory. Basically, they count time in defined intervals. And there are two main ways to create a timer. The first is using a handler and a runnable. So a handler is something that runs the runnable, and a runnable is where the code that you want to run goes. So I know that might sound a bit confusing at first, but you're going to get used to it as we start coding it out and you'll kind of see how it works together. But yeah, a handler runs the runnable and the runnable is where the code goes. So the second method, as it shows here, is using a countdown timer. This is a method that I generally prefer to use, and excuse me. And in my opinion, it's easier than using a handler and a runnable. I mean, the amount of code is almost the same, but just the method, just like writing it out, is much easier in my opinion. But you can decide that for yourself as we code it through. So let's get back to Android Studio and start coding out our timers. So let's just go to File, New Project. And once again, we are just going to open up an empty activity. Let's call this one Timer Demo. And once again, you can name it whatever you want. And I'm once again not going to change anything here, and I'm just going to click Finish and wait for it to open up. Great, that was quick this time. So, once again, we're just going to start coding over here in our Java file. So to create a timer, we are first going to use the first method, which was a handler and a runnable. So to do this, we first create our handler in our Java file. And this is, we just called the object handler. Let's name this handler is equal to new handler. And we add our semicolon. Actually, no, we don't. Oh, no, yes, we do. Sorry about that. Yeah. So here we created an object called handler, and we also named it handler. And here we're also going to add in something into the parameters called looper. So if you just search in looper dot and there you get main looper. It's just something that's going to allow our code to like run more smoothly. But yeah, so here we created our handler and now we are going to create our runnable. So to do this, we create an object runnable and let's just name it run. So runnable run is equal to new runnable. And as I mentioned before, the handler is what runs the runnable. So although we've created our runnable, to for it to work, we need to refer back to our handler. So as you can see, once I clicked enter after creating my runnable object, it automatically creates a new method with the same name as our runnable, like the name we gave our runnable. So this new function that I created is where the code that we want to run goes. So for now, we'll just add in a quick log message, but generally you can put any code you want to run into like in this area. So to print out our log message, we'll enter here, we'll say log dot I and then our parentheses. Wait, sorry, log dot, there we go. So for our parameters for our think the first one was tag. Yeah. Yep, there we go. For our tag, we are simply going to print out, hey, new report, colon. And then for our message parameter, we're going to input a second has passed by. Use my typing skills. And yeah, so at this point, what we've done is we have created a handler. We've created a runnable, but we have yet to add any time variable related to timing this. So to add a time variable, we need to schedule when the handler runs. So I'm going to reiterate this because it's a good concept to understand. The handler runs the runnable. So we have our handler, we have our runnable, but we have no time variable. And to do that, we need to schedule when the handler runs the runnable. And that is done by a function called post delayed. So to do this, we're first going to reference our handler by its name. So for us, it was just handler. We're going to say dot post delayed. And for this, our parameters, the parameters include runnable and then time. So our first parameter, the runnable, will pass as this. And then for the time, we want to enter the time after we want the code to run again. Or in other words, it's like how many after like what time intervals do you want this function runnable to run? So the time here is referred to in milliseconds. So what that means is if I enter 1 here, it'll run after every millisecond. So if you want to run it after every second, we're going to have to enter 1000. If you want to run it every 2 seconds, we're going to enter 2000. If you want to do 10 minutes, we're going to enter 10,000 and so on. So for now, let's just enter 1000 to run it after every minute. So let's exit that runnable function. Now that we've written down the code that we want to run and told the handler when to run it, we're going to need to write down a line of code that starts this process. So let's go through the steps again. We create our handler, we create our runnable, and then we specify the function that we want our runnable to run, which is this log function right here. And then we tell the handler when to run it. And now we have to tell it to run it. And this is quite a simple line. We first reference our handler, named handler, and then we use a function called dot post. And then inside the parentheses, we add the name of the method that we want to run, which is just run, and colon. And that's it for creating a timer using a handler and a runnable. I recommend experimenting more with this in your own time. You can try adding different functions in here. You can try messing with the time to see just like what it looks like running for for every millisecond, every 2 milliseconds, 20, 100. Like just experiment on your own. It's just a fun thing to try out. But now let's try creating a timer using our second method, which was the countdown timer. So to do that, let's just comment this first part out. I'll leave it here in case you need to look at it later. And then there we go. So we'll comment that first part out and we'll just go down a bit. And here we're gonna start creating a simple countdown timer. So to do this, we have to call an object called countdown timer, and I'm just gonna name this count. So countdown timer count is equal to new countdown timer. And to do in here, we'll pass in two parameters. So the first parameter that needs to be passed in is the number of milliseconds you want the timer to run for in the form of a long. So a long is basically just a large int. So first one is the number of milliseconds you want it to run, or just how long the timer is going to be. So for now, let's just say we want it to run for 10 seconds. So as I mentioned before, this is in milliseconds, so we're going to say 10,000 to represent 10 seconds. And our second interval is the countdown interval. And this is basically how often you want the timer to check back in with you. And this is also in the form of milliseconds. So let's say I'm going to run my timer for 10 seconds and I wanted to check back with me every second. So that would be 1000 milliseconds. And as you can see, while I was creating my countdown timer object, it automatically created two functions for me, on tick and on finish. So on tick, let's focus on this one first. This is a function that will be called every time the countdown interval is reached. So our countdown interval was 1000 seconds or 1 second. So basically what that means is every second that passes by, the onTick function will be called and run. If our countdown interval was 2 seconds, the onTick function would have been called every 2 seconds. I hope that clarifies it. So the parameter L, long L, inside the onTick function will be it indicates how many milliseconds until the timer is done. So once again, countdown interval indicates after how many seconds on tick will be called, and long L indicates how much time is still left. So to let's try coding something in the onTick function that will create an output regarding how much time is left for the timer to run. So to do this, once again, we'll reference our good old log function. So we'll do log.i, and for the tag, we'll say amount of seconds left. And I'm just going to go with seconds because it's easier for us to understand. And then for our second parameter, the message, we'll say, we'll actually reference our parameter L, the long L from the onTick function. As I mentioned before, this is how much time is left. So it's very handy referencing this. But remember that long L is in the form of milliseconds. So if you want to get this message printed out in seconds, we're going to have to divide L by 1000. And also, the log function has both these parameters in the form of strings, so we can't leave these as longs. So we're going to use string.value of, and then we'll use a long one. Let's add these inside. And there we go. And now it's in the form of a string. So let's also add our semicolon. And yeah, so basically what we've done is that we've told our countdown timer that every second call the onTick function, and the onTick function will log the amount of seconds left in just in seconds. So yeah. Now let's look at our other function. So this other function on finish was also automatically created when we created our countdown timer object. So what the onFinish function does is that it runs when the countdown is completely finished. So this parameter here, if you forgot already, it's basically how long the timer will run for. So 10,000 milliseconds means 10 seconds is how long our timer is going to run for. And after those 10 seconds have run out, the onFinish function will run. So for this function, let's also print out a log message to print out once, like I said, once our timer runs out. So let's just say log.i, and for our tag, let's print the time is finished. The timer is finished. There we go. And then for our message, we'll say no more countdown. Countdown. There we go. No more countdown. Wait, that sounds weird. No more countdown left. There we go. Grammar does matter sometimes. I mean, yeah. Anyways, so we have finished filling out most of the stuff in our countdown timer. We've looked at the onTick function. We looked at the onFinish function. There's one last thing left to finish our countdown timer. Just like in when we were using our handler and our runnable, we had to tell it when to run. So for the countdown timer as well, we have to tell it when to run or when to start running. So at the end of our curly bracket for the countdown timer, the ones from here to here, we're gonna write down this small piece of function, the small function that's just dot start, and then add our parentheses, and don't forget your semicolon. And this small piece of code is basically how we create a timer using our countdown method. So now let's talk about the main differences between these two methods. I personally, like I mentioned, I prefer the countdown timer, and it's mainly because you only have to write down this one main piece of code, and then it'll create these two methods for you, and then you just write down what functions you want it to run. I personally find the handler and runnable to be a bit more time consuming, just because you have to create your handler, you have to create your runnable, you have to do the post delayed, the post functions. So yeah, I personally prefer the countdown timer method. But a general difference between the two is that the handler and runnable method kind of runs into the future. Basically, what it means is it'll just keep running, and you most likely need to add an if statement here somewhere to stop it. Whereas the countdown timer literally counts down the time left. It basically acts like the timers we use in our phones every day. And yeah, so that concludes my lesson on timers and list views. I hope that cleared some things up for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you in our next lesson. Thank you so much for listening.